The little girl whispered, "She reminds me of Mama, and the lonesome rancher father couldn't let her leave." The wind swept over the wide-open plains, carrying the scent of rain and wild sage across the Barrow Creek Valley. The land stretched forever, rolling hills, a herd of cattle dotting the distance, and a lonely ranch house sitting against the horizon. Inside that house lived Caleb Holt, a man who carried silence like a second skin. For 3 years, he had spoken little beyond what was necessary to tend the cattle, manage the ranch hands, and care for his little girl. His wife, sweet Emma, had passed away when their daughter was only 3. Since then, Caleb's world had shrunk to chores, livestock, and the fragile laughter of his child, Clara. Clara was 6 now, bright-eyed, with honey-colored hair and freckles scattered like stars across her cheeks. She was Caleb's reason for breathing, his reason for rising at dawn and driving himself into the soil each day. Still, no matter how many stories he told her by the fire, or how many braids he clumsily attempted in her hair, there remained an ache. Clara longed for something he couldn't provide, a mother's gentle touch. That truth revealed itself the morning the stagecoach arrived. Caleb had ridden into town with Clara for supplies: flour, sugar, nails for the barn roof. They were tying the wagon outside the mercantile when the stage came rumbling down Main Street, horses snorting, wheels throwing up dust. From inside stepped a young woman, her dress travel-worn, her hat tugged low. She carried no more than a single leather satchel and a folded shawl draped over her arm. There was a tired grace about her, the way she squared her shoulders even as the townsfolk stole curious glances. Caleb paid her no mind at first, but Clara did. The little girl tilted her head, sniffed the air like a curious pup, and tugged on her father's sleeve. "Papa," she whispered, eyes wide and unblinking, "she smells like Mama." The word struck Caleb like a hammer blow. His throat tightened, his heart stumbled. For a moment, the world seemed to hush, the creak of wagon wheels, the chatter of townsfolk, all fading under the weight of his daughter's voice. "Clara," he muttered, pulling his hat lower, "don't say such things." But Clara was already stepping toward the stranger. The woman knelt instinctively when Clara approached, setting her satchel down so she could meet the girl's gaze. She had gentle eyes, green, clear, and searching, and a faint scent of lavender clung to her clothes. "Hello there," the woman said softly. "What's your name?" "Clara Holt," the girl announced proudly, though her small voice trembled. "You smell like Mama. She had soap like yours." The woman's lips parted. A flicker of sorrow passed through her eyes before she smiled faintly. "My name's Eliza. I just came here looking for work. Maybe your Mama and I both liked lavender soap." Caleb strode over, his boots heavy on the dirt road. He tipped his hat stiffly, his dark eyes guarded. "Ma'am," he said gruffly, "my girl doesn't mean trouble." "No trouble at all," Eliza replied, her smile kind but not pitying. "She's sweet." Caleb nodded once, gathering Clara close to his side. Yet when Eliza bent to lift her satchel again, Clara wriggled free and darted forward, grabbing the woman's hand. "Don't go," Clara pleaded. "Papa, can she come with us?" Caleb froze, the world spinning around that single question. Eliza did not press herself upon them. She merely gave Clara's hand a gentle squeeze and said, "I don't want to be a bother. I'm here to ask Mr. Tully at the boarding house if they need help." But the boarding house had long since closed, Caleb knew. Tully had taken ill, and his daughter ran things poorly. Eliza would find little kindness there. He looked at her, truly looked, and saw someone weary but strong, fragile but unbroken. Clara, still clutching her hand, whispered again, "She reminds me of Mama." Caleb's chest tightened until he could hardly breathe. He wanted to speak the word no, to keep his distance, to guard the walls he had built around his aching heart. But when he looked down at Clara, he saw hope shining brighter than he'd ever seen since Emma died. By sundown, Eliza was riding with them in the wagon, Clara nestled between her and Caleb. She had accepted Caleb's offer of supper, though he told himself it was only neighborly decency, nothing more. Still, he couldn't ignore how natural her presence felt, how Clara's laughter bubbled with a joy he hadn't heard in years. As the wagon rolled toward the ranch, the lonely father told himself he would let her stay just for the night. Only until she found her footing. But deep inside, Caleb Holt already knew the truth. The moment his daughter whispered those words, "She reminds me of Mama," he could not let Eliza go. The days that followed changed the Holt ranch in ways Caleb never imagined. Eliza had meant to stay only a night, she said so as she folded her shawl and smoothed the plain skirts she wore. Yet Clara clung to her, begging for stories at bedtime and insisting she sit beside her at breakfast. Caleb kept his distance, always careful not to ask more of Eliza than she offered, yet somehow she slipped into their lives as easily as dawn breaks across the prairie. She cooked when Caleb forgot. She mended Clara's ripped dresses without being asked. She sang softly in the evenings, hymns Emma once sang, and though her voice was different, it filled the ranch house with something Caleb had thought forever lost: warmth. Still, Caleb fought against it. He rose earlier, worked longer hours, as though labor could beat back the feeling growing inside him. He told himself she would leave soon, that she deserved more than a lonely widower's quiet home on a wind-beaten ranch. But each time he caught Clara holding Eliza's hand, or saw the way Eliza's eyes softened when Clara called her Miss Eliza in that tender way, his resolve cracked a little more. It came to a breaking point one night when Clara had a fever. The child lay restless, her cheeks flushed, breath shallow. Caleb, near frantic, could only sit at her bedside, helpless. Memories of Emma's last days rushed back, sharp as a knife. He gripped Clara's hand, whispering prayers he hadn't spoken aloud in years. Eliza entered with a cool cloth and a basin of water. She moved with steady hands, calming Clara with a lullaby and bathing her brow. Caleb sat frozen, watching the woman who was not his wife tend to his daughter with the same devotion Emma once gave. Clara's fever broke before dawn. Exhausted, Caleb stepped outside to the porch, where Eliza stood gazing at the stars. "You saved her," he said hoarsely. Eliza shook her head. "She's strong, Caleb. She just needed someone beside her." Caleb's throat worked. "That someone should have been me." "You were there," she said gently. "You always are. But a child needs more than one set of hands. More than one heart." Her words pierced him, because he knew she spoke truth. The weeks stretched on. Eliza remained, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because Clara made it clear she belonged. Caleb noticed the way his daughter's laughter grew freer, the way the house no longer felt like a tomb filled with silence. And Caleb, slowly, reluctantly, let down his guard. He told Eliza about Emma, about the night she died, and the promise he'd made never to love again, because loving meant losing. He expected Eliza to step back, to leave. Instead, she touched his weathered hand and whispered, "Loving also means living." For the first time in years, Caleb allowed himself to imagine a future not bound by grief. The turning point came at the spring fair in town. Caleb had taken Clara and Eliza into town, partly against his better judgment. The square was alive with music, stalls selling sweets, children chasing one another with ribbons. Clara begged Eliza to ride the carousel with her, and Caleb stood watching as his daughter spun, her laughter ringing across the fairgrounds. "She looks happy," Eliza said, her eyes shining. "She hasn't laughed like that since—" Caleb stopped, unable to finish. Eliza looked at him steadily. "Since her mama. And yet, here she is, laughing again." Something inside Caleb shifted. The walls he'd built crumbled, and all that remained was truth. He turned to her, voice rough. "You've given her back her childhood, Eliza. You've given me back more than I thought I'd ever feel again." Eliza's lips parted, a question in her eyes. Before fear could make him swallow the words, Caleb said it plain. "Stay. Not for Clara's sake. For mine." The silence stretched, broken only by Clara's laughter echoing across the fair. Eliza's hand trembled as she reached for his, her voice hushed but steady. "I never wanted to leave." And when Clara came running, clutching Eliza's skirts, the little girl beamed up at them both and declared, "Now we can be a family." Caleb Holt, the lonesome rancher who once swore love was a closed chapter, bent his head and finally allowed hope to take root. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or the years beyond. But as he held Eliza's hand in one and his daughter's in the other, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he would never let either of them go.